Library Board of Trustees, Wednesday, March 5, 2025. We will start today with a presentation from Michael Connor. Who is it? Who's
Yes,
gonna
ma'am. I'll start out.
tag teaming?
We'll tag team it as we frequently do.
Yep,
So,
yep.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As Sandy mentioned, my name is Michael Short with Stiefel Nicholas. I'm here with my colleague Connor Swanson from Stiefel Nicholas. We are the district's financial advisors, and so we're here to continue our conversations about potential improvements, replacement of the Harrisonville Library. You may recall that in previous meetings, we have discussed a number of different options and how they might be approached. And we were asked today to narrow that down, focus a bit on one particular sum, and that being $8.8 million as a goal for a project fund for the Harrisonville facility. So we have done that, and yeah, take that on down. And so I want to reiterate for you and update some of the assumptions that we made in our analysis of the feasibility of this project. One of the goals that you have is to do what you can do with what you have and not ask the voters for more revenues or new additional taxes. So that's what we've done. We've assumed that there's $3.8 million available in capital reserves at the end of the 2024 year, and that's exclusive of other reserves that you have deposited with MOSIP in the form of investment. So that's sort of the cash on hand, if you will, okay, that's available to you. We've also assumed a 2% growth in assessed valuation in reassessment years and a 1% growth in non-odd years. You might recall the Missouri statutes require reassessments every 2 years of property. It's on a rolling basis, and assessors get to that as they can. We'll talk a little bit about how that relates to historical growth, but that's the assumption in the models that we've used. We've held the levy static at 0.242 cents during the projection period. We've assumed a 98% tax collection percentage. The reason we do that is because there's always some protests, and so we've assumed that 98% of what is levied by the collector is actually collected. In reality, you'll find that because past protests are then collected from past years, you'll get closer to 100, but it's just prudent to assume about a 98% collection rate to account for protested taxes. We matched up the operational cost projections starting in this year, 2025, with the adopted budget. Again, that seems prudent to assume that you'll spend what you budgeted. We'll talk in a moment about the reality of that, but we've assumed that you'll spend what you budgeted. Small miscellaneous income figure was just held static through the assumption period because it's very small for your district, and so it's really hard to predict. And then we used savings from the existing Harrisonville lease payments and incorporated them back into the revenue stream, but not until 2029. We think that's a reasonable period. And we've assumed a 5% cost of borrowing. That's higher actually than it would be today, but again, for purposes of planning, we think that that's prudent. Okay? So going on to the next slide, the first thing I want to talk about before I asked Connor to delve a little bit more into the assumptions are two things: the time frame and then a reiteration of the annual appropriation lease debt or revenue bond structure. You did not ask your voters for general obligation bond authority, so you don't have the authority to issue general obligation bonds. The type of financing that we're talking about doing is a lease purchase financing, annual appropriation based upon the district's pledge to annually appropriate the debt service payments that are required to make the bond payments. It is a structure sometimes called certificates of participation financing. It is frequently, in fact very commonly used by jurisdictions in the state of Missouri to do their financing. Doesn't require voter approval if you've already got money to pay it, and you do. Credit factors will consider the annual appropriation risk. So when this is when this is evaluated, the credit rating agency will acknowledge that there's a risk the district might not annually appropriate in some year. And bondholders know that, and they're made aware of that. There's a slightly higher interest rate that's associated with that risk because it's not a general obligation bond. There's no debt limit on it. It's really tied to the usable life of the facilities too. So maximum maturity of 30 years, but sometimes shorter if the facility really is not designed to last 30 years, but that would not be the case of the branch. So In terms of timing on the process, we took the liberty of sketching out for you a calendar. This is typically what we do in transactions like this. You will see a financing calendar. This is really, truthfully, for us and the lawyers to keep us on track and keep everybody working, but it gives you an illustration of the tasks that have to be completed in that estimated 120-day period. The first task, and I have plugged this in on May the 21st, that's a regular board meeting of yours, and that would be to adopt a resolution of intent. That's an IRS requirement that allows you then to recapture, I should say, monies you're spending now or have spent in the last 3 months from the proceeds of the bond issues when they're finally sold and closed. So the IRS lets you go back and capture things you've spent if they relate to the project. But you need to adopt a resolution of intent. It basically also says to your public, we're thinking about doing this, we think it's going to cost this much, here's what we're looking at. It is not binding in terms of requiring you to take that action, but if you don't have that resolution, you're not going to be able to reimburse yourself under the IRS regs. So then this contemplates the various steps we and the lawyers would go through in getting your transaction ready and ultimately closing it on September the 30th. So a lot of these dates and things will likely change if you decide to move forward. We massage this as the realities of time and workloads hit people. And there's no reason you have to wait till May the 21st. If you decide in the next week or before your April meeting you want to do it, we'll just bump all this back. And so this is really for illustration purposes, okay? Now I'm going to ask Connor to talk a little bit more about the assumptions that we made and specifically the realities that sort of relate to those assumptions, okay?
Yep. Thanks, Michael. So as Michael mentioned earlier, we try to stay kind of conservative on the assumptions because obviously this is public funds. We want to be as conservative as possible. So like we've assumed 1% to 2% for your growth every year and other year. In reality, the library has grown 8% on average for the past 5 years. So we think that, in reality, hopefully the library will grow more than 1% to 2%, but if for some reason you don't, you'll still be okay with our current assumptions on the next page you'll see. Additionally, we used the operating budget. We went back with Lori and looked through kind of the past budgets, and you guys typically do not hit your budgeted expenses, which is a good thing. So we also think that's another kind of good savings area for you. And then I think that really is kind of the two main ones. And then on the following page, you'll kind of see the product of, and this is sort of a summarized version, a product of the assumptions that Michael and I were talking about over the past couple slides. So the first is an $8,800,000 project, just assuming you guys are going to finance it entirely, so you're not going to contribute any of the money you have in your fund balance that Michael mentioned earlier. And with that, as you'd imagine, with a larger borrowing, you're going to have more interest to pay. And so you'll see kind of more red in those annual columns. That means you're sort of eating into your fund balance each year. Nothing, catastrophic or major to where you wouldn't be able to function as a library, but you would kind of spend down the capital fund balance, I should say, for about 15-ish years. The next option is the same project fund, $8.8 million, but you're going to contribute $1 million up front, so you're going to be borrowing $7.8. And as you'd imagine, kind of the borrowing costs went down, $80,000 per year in debt service between a full, financing everything and financing $1 million less, and that, shortens your guys' deficits for the first 4 or 5 years, and then slowly builds back up that capital fund balance. And then the third is the same, but you're just going to contribute $2 million up front. So after your $3.8 million in the capital fund balance, if you did this financing next year, you'd contribute $2 million, so it kind of dropped down to a little over 2.2 after the debt service payment. And that one, as you could guess, is the lowest of the three in your annual debt service payment. So that one is, $150,000-$160,000 less than the largest per year. And with that, you have the shortest kind of term of eating into your annual, I guess, deficit for your capital fund balance, and it builds back up slowly over time. And if you really wanted to kind of boil it down, you could see at the very end of the financings kind of where the capital fund balances under these assumptions would end up under kind of each scenario. And that.
Yeah, on the summary then, how are you doing this page?
Oh.
Like that? Okay,
Yep.
all right, very good. the point to be made, every one of these scenarios you can afford to do with your existing resources. And when we talk about deficit, which is not a word that anyone likes to see, this is a paper deficit, okay? This is a projection deficit. In reality, you would never budget that deficit. You would always adjust revenues or expenses as appropriate to make sure that you don't really have a red column in any particular year. You have a lot of reserves, and so one thing you can do is simply draw from the reserves and plan to in the year. Or you may find that instead of the 1% assumption on revenue growth, it was 3.2, and that makes it up. Or your budget was expended at 90%, not 100. There are a number of ways in these assumptions where the red in those three columns that we show you, that will, in our opinion, never actually need to materialize, okay? Because you'll plan for it not to. So,
You're worried about me.
so, in sum, that's the update from the last presentation that we gave you, and the point to be made is you're in a really good position in terms of being able to do this. And if you choose to, and I know you have other projects, and I know that there are other things on the horizon that you think about and that you talk about. So you have the option then, going back up to these three scenarios, to actually bond the entire debt for Harrisonville, make adjustments that would eliminate the pink-red column, and keep a very healthy fund balance to use somewhere else if you need to. But you can also do it on any one of these other ones. We've assumed a 20-year payout on this, because we were asked to. Another assumption, another variable we could run, and likely would, if this progresses, is to see what it would look like to do this over 15 years and shorten it down. I don't think you want to do it over 10. This is too big a nut to crack for 10 years, but I think you could reduce this to 15 years borrowing, and you'll save some interest costs, and you'll pay it off faster. So, should you decide to proceed with any or all of these scenarios, we'll be running that analysis as well to say this could be done in 15 years this way, and then you can decide. And that does not have to be decided in the next month or even 2 months. This is something that becomes closer to a game day decision when you get closer to the marketing period of the bonds. We look at the market, we look at the rates, and then we can say, okay, district, we've been talking about 20 years. We really think maybe, 25, is that what I have on here, 25?
Yeah.
25 years. So we could shorten it to 20 or 15. So, and it may be that it's, instead of 25, it's 22. Or instead of 25, it's 21. I mean, there could be a way just to shrink it down. Thanks for reminding me, we're on 25 years here, which is typical for library financings on buildings, by the way, so. We're happy to answer questions that you all might have.
I have a few.
Yes, ma'am.
So where did the 8.8 come from?
We were provided that by Todd and staff. Yeah, asked us to focus on that.
And what interest rate did we assume on this?
5.
Just 5, okay.
You ran this up about 4.5.
Yeah, based on a current market, it's probably 60 to 75, or 0.6 to 0.7% higher.
We're making
60
certain
to 70%
assumptions
higher.
about the credit rating for the district. This district's not been rated by one of the national credit rating agencies, Moody's or Standard & Poor's, but we think that this is a AA credit, and so at a minimum, it's an A1, which is the highest single A credit, and so that's a variable that has yet to be proven out. I mean, we got to go to the rating agency, but you all have a lot of money in the bank. You've got sound financials, so you should be rated very well, we think.
And then do we have any estimates on the cost of issuance, underwriter, underwriters council, bond council, you guys?
So that is built into those
So-
numbers,
So
yeah.
we're financing that amount as well?
It's all
Yep.
built in there.
Okay. We
Yeah.
have it.
We generally
Numbers.
plug in 2%.
Okay.
Yeah, we just generally plug in 2%. I will tell you that, I'm gonna do this from memory, but I think I can. When we served as financial advisor to Mid-Continent Public Library on their large financing, we brought the cost of issuance in at well under 1%. We brought it in like at 0.8, I think. And that was an economy of scale a little bit because they borrowed $80 million, but also because it was larger, you know, we will go through a competitive process for bond underwriters like you did to hire us. And we can usually get that fee negotiated pretty favorably.
Any thoughts on what the interest rate's gonna be doing? No predict, I know, that's a mean
You
question,
know,
sorry.
I tell you, I don't, because, you know, I will tell you one thing, the municipal capital markets do not like uncertainty. And right now, there is uncertainty. And so, we just watch this every day to see what's gonna happen. I'm anxious to see what the close of today is after the speeches last night and everything, so we'll just see what it is. It
What
just.
did it open at today? Or what was it closed yesterday?
Oh, boy. Yeah, it's kind of odd because our municipals run off a separate, this might be too much information, but taxable deals run off the treasury. Municipal deals run off what's called the municipal market data, MMD, which is sort of the average of a 20-year AAA rated, it's the highest rated deal you could get, and it averages those yields and takes that. It was, I think, like 150 to 200 basis points below the treasury, so probably, I guess I can actually kind of give a rough idea here. I gotta find my numbers here. To give you an exact would be, for 20 years from now, it was a little under 4%, maybe right around 4% for 20 years.
And that's the highest grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you notch off of that for other grades of rating. So that would be like a AAA rating, highest you can get. So then you get a little, gotta pay a little more if you're not a AAA. Hardly anybody is.
Take it off the best
Yeah.
potential,
That's what
rather
we do.
than.
We
yeah.
index off that and then
Yeah.
work from there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions or any thoughts right now? Okay, thank you guys.
Sure.
I guess at this point, we can recess. I would entertain a motion to recess to executive session for real estate and negotiated contract, both under the revised statutes.
I entertain that motion.
I'll second it. We'll take a roll call vote. Tanya, yes. Diana?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
All right. We're going to go in here for our closed session, and then we'll come back here to, if we have any business we've done, and to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Close and come back to do something open. Do we just
I think you just,
reconvening the open session? We're reconvening the open session. We have some things we're gonna move forward on that we discussed in closed session, so whoever wants to.
I make a motion that we proceed with the purchase of the property on Locust Street.
second that?
We're gonna take a roll call vote for the purchasing of the land. Oh, and author, can you add to that the authorization of Robin to sign those
And
documents?
that, I amended that Robin Hudson will be our signature on that real contract.
So we're gonna take a roll call vote for the land acquisition on Locust with Robin Hudson to be the authorized signer. Dennis?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Tanya, yes.
I would like to make a motion that we authorize Robin to sign an agreement with Navigate.
I'll second.
Task order 3.
Okay, task order number 3.
So the vote, we'll take a roll call vote for signing having Robin sign the contract with Navigate for task order number 3. Dennis?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Tanya, yes. One more. Who wants to bring up the last one?
I make a motion that we have Robin Hudson sign the documents necessary to have Clark Anderson be our architect on this project.
Second.
We will take a roll call vote to approve the contract with Clark Anderson with Robin for the signer. Dennis?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Tanya? Yes. I was like, Tanya. I have to say something. Okay. I don't think there's anything else. I think we've.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Given that you've taken these actions, it would be our recommendation that we go ahead and get a financing calendar in place, and look at bringing to you a couple of items as early as your April meeting, then this resolution of intent, and also the retention of bond counsel. Because you're gonna need bond counsel to get started on this stuff. So we'll plan to come back in April with that stuff.
We'll make those motions then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's nothing to do now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
All those in favor of the adjournment, will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?